Well, hello, everyone. I would like to first introduce myself. I'm Professor Susan Breau, and I have the honor to be the Director of Research Student at the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, part of the School of Advanced Studies at the University of London. And I have my presentation already up. If you have questions, please put them in the question and answers box, and we will get to them at the end of my presentation. I hope to answer any of your questions that you might have today. I may not have all the answers, but I'll do my best. Now, I want to talk about this first picture because it kind of makes me laugh. Because as you know, London is known for being very rainy, and this is a very sunny, beautiful picture of London. But actually today, the sun is out. It rains quite a bit, but there are also absolutely beautiful days in London, and this picture reflects one of those fabulous days. I'm here to talk about the MPhil PhD program at the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies. The Institute of Advanced Legal Studies is part of the School of Advanced Study, SAS, at the University of London. Now, people often ask me, what is that? Well, it is a group of research institutes that have come together primarily in the humanities and social sciences to advance the knowledge in various areas. And you will see, and we start first because we are under A, the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, the Institute of Classical Studies, the Institute of Commonwealth Studies, the Institute of English Studies, the Institute of Historical Research, the Institute of Modern Languages Research, Institute of Philosophy, the Warburg Institute, and the Central Academic Initiative. In addition, we have some groups that accept PhD students, including Digital Humanities and the Refugee Studies Initiative. But I'm here to talk about law. I'm a lawyer. I was called to the bar many, many years ago. And then I came to London to study to get my doctorate. And eventually I became a professor of international law. And so I am a lawyer, a domestic lawyer from Canada, but also a legal academic and a professor. So the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies was founded in 1947 as a part of the University of London. SAS was not yet in existence. It's 31 years old now, but the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies is quite a bit older. It's a national academic institution. It's a postgraduate institution. We do not offer undergraduate law degrees. We offer a master's program in legislative drafting and a doctoral program. Now, our master's and doctoral programs are truly international with students and supervisors from across the globe. The aim of the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies is the prosecution and promotion of legal research and training of graduate students in its principles and methods. We have many areas of expertise, and I have to say this is growing because I have an extra one to add to this list even. But we offer supervision in company law, comparative law, criminal law and evidence, European criminal law, financial crime, financial services and regulation law, gender, sexuality and law, information law and policy, law and society, legal education, legislative studies and law reform, public international law, public law and regulation, and two new areas of PhD research, law and humanities, which we have just put up on our website, and we are actively seeking to recruit students in a multidisciplinary PhD between law and humanities. And we have a law and technology group that is specifically dealing with issues such as cybersecurity, medical technology, and law, and a big area of interest, artificial intelligence and law. We have two separate research centers, the Sir William Dale Center for Legislative Studies, which really hosts our LLM in legislative drafting. Professor Constantine Stefanou is the director of that program, and actually some students who complete their masters in legislative drafting go on to do their PhD with us. We also have the Information Law and Policy Center. That center does not host a particular PhD, but it shows that we have expertise in that area. They offer events and conferences on information law that concerns privacy, data protection, and is quite active in our institute. So looking at the program itself, and you will have questions, and I'm happy to answer those at the end, but I'm just going to give you a broad brush stroke of what the program looks like. First, the application process. This is a law PhD, and so we prefer candidates who have a law degree at either an undergraduate or postgraduate level. That is not to say there was a requirement for a British law degree. We are an international program, and we have law degrees from across the globe, students with law degrees from across the globe. There are exceptions. Some might have master's degrees that might be law-related, such as criminology studies and human rights. So the qualifications, when I say a 2-1 or a merit, for those of you who do not know what those marks are, I describe it in the North American context as a B+ student, which I was. You don't have to have a first in your degree or an A, but we do like to see evidence of academic merit, and that is sort of around the B+ category. The proposal is the most, when I talk about the application process, it's about 30% your qualifications, but 70%, and the deal breaker is the proposal. In other words, if the proposal is not good, we will not make an offer. By the way, when people email me, I send them guidelines to preparation of a proper proposal. The proposal is usually about 10 A4 pages. How many words is that? Could be 2,500 to 3,000 words. It has to have a working title, a research focus, an outline structure. The most important are the last two. How does it fit within the wider literature? A student has got to persuade me that they have knowledge of the issues. Let's give an example. If you were doing a topic in criminal law, for example, and you wanted to look at the crime of robbery, and you identified that there was a problem with the legislation in a certain countries or European legislation or about robbery, and you wanted to prove that there could be changes made to make the law clearer or better, that is a fit. However, if you wanted to describe the law of robbery and tell me all about it, that's not a fit. The key thing is it has to be new or unique. And when I say new and unique, we are not scientists. We're not looking for the cure for cancer, but we are looking for a unique or new take on existing legal problems. They can be international legal problems, they can be domestic legal problems, they can be European legal problems, but it needs to be your unique view and you cannot do that. It's impossible to do that unless you are familiar with the literature. When I was doing my proposal for my PhD, I actually spent quite a bit of time, and I was fortunate I had done my master's in international law and knew during my master's I was going to apply for a doctorate. So I started to read every article and book in my subject. And I began to see that there was a gap. There was a gap in argument, particularly historical gap. I was at a time in history that this issue had particularly come to the forefront, and no one had actually looked at this particular gap. And I was able to say in my proposal, I want to look at the new fact situations, the new legal situations, and apply my recommendations or my view as to the lawfulness of these particular issues. That is a fit. but that's because I was aware of what literature, and what do I mean by literature? Lawyers, it's rather unique as opposed to the other fields that I outlined earlier in my presentation. Literature is broad. It includes academic articles, but as you well know, it also includes legal cases. It includes legislation that could be domestic or international, depending on the topic. It could also include policy briefs or discussions around proposed legislation. It could even include non-governmental organization reports on various issues. And so wider literature means wide. It doesn't just mean looking at a textbook on your particular topic. It means reading academic articles. It means reading the legislation. It means reading the cases. And where does your proposal fit in? I can tell you from having read now dozens and dozens and dozens of research proposals that I can tell within a few minutes whether the student is familiar or not familiar with the literature. Now, it doesn't mean you have to have an in-depth knowledge of everything, but you would at least have had in your master's degree or in your own private study. Some of us are coming back to school after some time. In your own private study, have read the landscape of your particular topic. And the second really important thing is, how are you going to answer this question? And that is called research methodology. Now, research methodology is often taught in master's programs. So forgive me, for some of you, you're very familiar with this term. For others, it's a bit daunting. I have to say, when I was applying to go back to school, I'd been a legal practitioner for 18 years, and I wasn't aware of research methodology particularly. I was aware, in fact, I had a master's in politics, and I was aware of political science research, but I wasn't aware of research methodology in law. Well, the good news is there are a number of current textbooks, including one called Contextualizing Legal Research. By the way, you can just Google legal research methodology now and find several books that can give you an idea. But the last point is ideas and plans change. This is not written in stone. All your supervisors are aware. For example, I had a meeting yesterday with a student and talked about how the topic was too broad to do in a 100,000-word thesis. And so they're aware that you may need to narrow down your topic. You may need to use a different methodology, that you may need to fit it into a theoretical framework. All of that is discussed with the supervisors. But the proposal, as I said, has at least got to show me that you've got knowledge of the area and that your question is unique, different, or will be what the guidelines say, an original contribution. Doesn't say novel, original contribution to legal literature. So how do I assess an application? Well, the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies is very different. And one of the questions I get, just to head this off at the pass, is do I need to find a supervisor? Not at the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies. We have two different stages. The first is what I would call the desktop review, which is the review that I do as director of the program. We do not search for supervisors unless you have passed that initial level. In other words, we look at your qualifications, we look at your proposal. And by the way, if the proposal is not in an area I'm particularly expert in, I have a team of people from across the globe that I can send a proposal to and say, does this make any sense in terms of your particular area of expertise? So the proposal is reviewed by myself or others. And if the proposal is well developed, there's a search for supervisors. That search is conducted by me, but in consultation with the applicant. Recently, I had an applicant in a very technical area of law, and I must admit, I did not know the academics who were working in that field. But my applicant had just finished a master's in that field and knew two experts in the field. And it was a delightful process because they both knew her. They both wanted to work with her. And it was absolutely delightful that she had known and could assist me. So sometimes the candidate is asked. And if the candidate doesn't know names and I have come up with names, the candidate is still asked at that stage, do you want to meet with these people? Because it's a two-way street. You've got to get along with your new supervisors, and the supervisors have got to get along with you. I often view it as almost some kind of matchmaking here. This is one of the most important relationships in your life, and I want to get it right, and I want to make sure everybody gets along. And again, I can usually tell within a few minutes. Okay. Now, sometimes the proposed supervisors may say, well, we really like this topic, but we don't think the proposal is quite there. You might be required to amend the proposal. That has happened. And recently, one student, I was very keen to accept her, but the supervisor had some reservations about the proposal, but she amended it and she got in without a problem. So it was really an important process to begin to discuss the topic, and the supervisors will have suggestions. When I say supervisors, normally we do not proceed to this stage unless we have a first and second supervisor. Occasionally, if we're up against a deadline, we might accept a student with one supervisor only on the proviso that a second supervisor will be found in the first semester. The decision is often made right then and there in the interview or just afterwards. It's not, I know how stressful this is. I don't like to keep people waiting. I tend to let them know right away. There have been times where it's been a no. And when it's been a no, it's because I don't think the team's going to work together. There's something wrong with the relationship between the three people, or it's that on questioning, it doesn't seem that this project is realistic. And it wasn't really evident from the proposal, but in discussion, it seems there could be some problems. It has happened. It's not 100% guarantee when you get to the interview stage that you will be accepted. But it is so critically important. The deadlines are for application, the 31st of July for a September start, and the 31st of October for a January start. But what I say to people is email me early, send me your CV and draft proposal before you file your online application with the applications web portal, so that I can at least steer you in the right direction. Sometimes even at that stage, I can look at it and say, one issue we've got now, for example, and I want to make this very clear to everybody who's online, is that we're sort of at our maximum capacity on AI. I'm afraid those of you who are interested in AI may have missed the boat, because AI now is being researched to death and we don't have too many openings. Now, saying that, I would send the proposal to our Law and Technology Committee, but for example, AI and international arbitration is already full. We've got too many people doing that. AI and judicial reasoning is already full. And the reason for that is you cannot duplicate research projects because of the requirement of originality. You can't have two very similar research projects going on in the same institute for sure. It's not possible to check around the country, and we don't do that. So it might be possible that somebody's doing a very similar project in another university. We can't prevent that, but we certainly can prevent two people doing the same project in our institute. We will not have that. And that's no AI, I've got to say, is one of those topics that we were blasted with proposals in the last 2 years, and we are almost at capacity. So let's say you've reached the good news that you were accepted into the program. The next question I often get is, what is an MPhil and what is a PhD? And why am I being accepted into an MPhil and not a PhD? Well, the United Kingdom system is this way. Unlike some jurisdictions that have courses and what are called comprehensive examinations to upgrade to a doctorate, we have a system of acceptance into a Master's of Philosophy degree with the possibility to upgrade to doctoral status after 2 years full-time and 3 years part-time. So no one is accepted directly into a doctoral program. And I've got to tell you, that really makes some people angry. Some people are already existing academics and they say, why can't you accept me directly into the doctoral program? Because it's based on a research project. You are being assessed on your project, not on you. And so we need to know that the project is capable of completion. And so we have milestones. The first milestone, which is relatively straightforward and most people get through, is called the progression review. This review is after a year full-time, 2 years part-time, done internally by your supervisors, reviewing just one chapter and an outline of your thesis. And they certify to the doctoral center at the School of Advanced Study that you should be allowed to progress towards your upgrade. This is very much like a funnel. Now, progression review, who doesn't get through? It's extremely rare that a student who has been accepted into the doctoral program doesn't get through all of these stages. I've got to say most students successfully complete their PhD. That's the good news. But there are some students that life changes. In other words, they may have lost their job, they may have had financial difficulties, they may have personal difficulties, and they are just not writing. That's the big thing. They're just not producing the material that's needed to show that they're engaging with their research project. It is kinder to stop them at the progression review than to allow them to continue to pay what is over £16,000 now for an international student per year in tuition. It is kinder to stop them and say, you will not complete your PhD at this rate. It's not going to happen. You need to, it's not it's a reflection of your project. It's a reflection that you are simply not engaging with the research project, which is a major initiative. When you take on a doctorate, whether full-time or part-time, you have to be prepared to follow it through from beginning to end, which is you need to do a literature review, you need to engage in the research methodology, you need to engage in the topic, do potentially interviews or doctrinal analysis, analyzing the texts, putting in your own views, and all of that, you arrive at a 100,000 word thesis. But you have to have an outline, a plan. And if you are not following that plan by the end of the first year or second year part-time, we have an obligation to tell you that and say, sorry, but we think you should come back at another time because you are not ready to finish. Now, as I said, 99.9% of the students get through progression review, and it's very rare that this happens. The second milestone is an upgrade. And again, if you've gone through progression review, your supervisors think you're going to be ready for upgrade. So again, almost all students get through their upgrade as well. And again, almost all students get through their viva. So this is all good news. But again, at upgrade, you have 2 external examiners from outside of your supervision team. One could be a member of faculty of one of the University of London universities, such as LSE, UCL, KCL, Queen Mary. Could be a research fellow attached to our institute. And then there could be an external professor from another university. They review a substantive chapter, not just a literature review or an introduction, a substantive chapter in your thesis. In fact, sometimes I say to people, please do even more than one chapter if you feel like it, if there's a chunk of work that you want to show your upgrade panel. Now, the upgrade panel, the purpose for this is to assess that you have made enough progress that you are going to be able to see your thesis through to completion. So they are looking at your research methodology, your theoretical framework. Again, the outline of your thesis. Often students prepare a PowerPoint presentation showing where they are and where they want to get through, where they are in their project. And it is a very helpful session. Students find this to be helpful. Some students get a little bit upset when they're criticized. By the way, I hate being criticized. It's one of the things, it's one of my character flaws. I hate it, hate it, hate it. But I've got to say, in this case, you've just got to suck it up and let them criticize you, because they are wanting to make your thesis better. They are wanting you to pass your viva with minor amendments rather than major amendments. And their goal is to get you there. And they are giving you suggestions for improvement. And so take them, understand that. They may say, you know, we think your theory is underdeveloped. You need to do a little bit more work on this. Or your research methodology is not quite clear enough. Or your case study is not, you haven't analyzed it enough. It can be that kind of criticism. But as I said, the vast majority of students with criticism get through their upgrade. And that's when you become a PhD student. That is after 2 years full-time or 4 years part-time. Can be a little bit earlier, but that's usually when it is. It can be a little bit later sometimes, but that's usually when it is. And so then you were looking at 1 more year full-time and 2 more years part-time to complete your thesis. And often we call it writing it up. So you are writing up your thesis, you are finishing your research, and you then go to what is called, and again, I was totally naive about this. I didn't even know what this meant, a viva. Well, a viva is an oral examination. It is not written, it is oral, with, again, 2 independent examiners, not the same examiners who did your upgrade, but 2 other examiners who examine your thesis as a whole. They read it in advance, they write a report, and then you attend for a viva examination. Again, the good news, most people get through at that stage. Now, almost no one gets through unscathed. In other words, often, and this is probably 80% of the time, you are asked to do, within a few months, minor amendments, which means a sentence wasn't clear, or you've made a mistake in your grammar or something like that, a minor amendment. Or it could be, there could be a few pages that they feel could be tightened up. In one of them that I recently was a supervisor for, they wanted the introduction to be a bit clearer. That's a minor amendment. And that is usually, you are given about 6 months to do your minor amendments, but you certainly can do them sooner. And normally students get them done within a month or so. The supervisors don't have you in again. They simply look at it and say, yeah, that's fine. There are occasions, as I said, what happens with the rest, the 20%? Well, about 10% will get through without any amendments. That's passed with no corrections. It's still a small number, but there are students that do. And then there are students that have major amendments, and that can be up to 1.5 years. It's not a very happy process when that happens. I feel badly for the students, but you have not failed. They are giving you an opportunity to make those changes, but they have substantial concerns with some of your chapters or some of the work you've done. As I said, it's rare, maybe not even 10%, but it's rare. Now, have there been theses that have completely failed? Yes. Not since I've been at the Institute has that happened. I do know that it can. Often the possibility is that a student is offered an MPhil degree for a shorter piece of work, taking parts of the thesis and putting it into a shorter piece of work that would pass. It can happen, but as I said, it is extremely rare. Why is it extremely rare? Because students don't get through progression review or upgrade to get to that stage. They're simply not, we simply don't want that to happen. And normally your supervisors, now, the one case I was involved in many years ago where there was major amendments, it turned out when I did some investigation, I was an examiner at a different university, not at IELTS. It turned out the students submitted the thesis without their supervisor's approval. Now that is catastrophic. If your supervisor tells you not to submit your thesis, it's not ready, listen to them. You don't want to go through that kind of a situation. So that's the other thing I've put on is supervision. As I said, this is a critically important relationship. You normally will see your supervisor about once a month, sometimes less when you're at the end stage because you're writing up and you really don't want to be interrupted. But your supervisor will be reading your material, making suggestions, making corrections, and telling you where they think you are in the process. They'll be reading for your progression review, they'll be reading for your upgrade, and they'll be reading for your viva. I cannot tell you the number of hours that supervisors put into this for very little pay. And you are truly lucky to have a group of legal experts who love to do this work. I've got to say, I'm so thrilled with my supervisors. They love to do this work. They want to engage, and they are there. And I go back to this all the time because they believe in your project. They believe in you, but more importantly, they believe in your project, that it has value. And so listen to them, take their advice. And finally, throughout your degree, you're expected to engage in training and development. And just let me advance my slides. Why have they gotten stuck? Yes, training and development. The Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, I'm justifiably proud of our training and development courses. We also have the world-renowned IELTS library, which is on the second floor of our building, but is also fully accessible online. They offer library guides and individual meetings with PhD students. They also have various training programs on online databases. We offer in January an introduction to research methods for law. We just finished last week. We offer PhD master classes in March, April, and May. And on top of that, the Doctoral Center at the University of London has a continuing series of courses at least once a week during term times of research training that is available to all of the students at the School of Advanced Studies. And that can be on things like interviewing techniques, preparing resumes, various issues in law. I did a session on AI in legal research. I'm doing another session in research training called Scholarship at Risk, which I hope you will get onto the website and sign up for. It's going to be very interesting in partnership with the Scholars at Risk program at the New York University to talk about doing research in the era of Trump and a growing authoritarianism across the globe. So how do we help you? Well, we monitor your progress. Every 6 months, you have to do a report to the Research Degrees Committee, and we monitor how you're doing, and we send you letters with suggestions for improvement or offers of help. Your supervisor also signs on to that report and tells us, in their opinion, how you were doing. We also have an Academic Quality and Standards Committee that considers the rules and regulations for the program. And finally, and very importantly, these days, any project, even if you are not doing interviews, has to pass the Research Ethics Committee, and there is a mandatory research ethics course on our Doctoral Center learning platform to take, just to fill out, which is quite a long form. And you cannot do any research until you've passed the Research Ethics Committee. So people normally do it in their first semester. They do the form. Doesn't mean you can't do a literature review, but you can't do any in-depth research until you've actually received ethics approval. Our research culture, now, this gives me a chance because I don't think I've put a separate slide, which I really should, and I'll remind myself for the next time. The nature of PhD study has changed, but I think in an extremely exciting way. Most of our students are online students. They are called distance learners. They study for their PhDs in their home cities or towns or villages. They get online and they see their supervisors online. They do their progression upgrade vivas online. I sometimes tell them it's nice if they come to their graduation in London, but there is no requirement for physical presence anymore. We encourage people to come if they can, to see the library, to see the spaces, which I'm going to show you in a minute, and to have a chance to physically meet people. But if you are precluded financially from doing that, that is not a detriment. All of our training programs that I just told you about are online. So you can't even do them in person, even if you wanted to. What you would do in person would be to visit the library, meet with your supervisors, potentially attend some conferences. But even our conferences and seminars, many of them, not all, but many of them are now online. So our research culture is changed. It is, I would call it almost a hybrid culture. It's certainly still a student-centered learning environment. We have our student reps. Hazel Stevenson is our rep for Institute of Advanced Legal Studies. She maintains a WhatsApp group for students that faculty are not able to access, so you can have a safe space to talk. We have research centers who hold events. We have cross-school interdisciplinary seminars. In fact, there's something running every day of the week during term time. We have research conferences, and we have a journal called Amicus Curiae, and we also post news of an academic nature on our website at the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies. By the way, these links may not work because we just had a new website that we are just in the process of changing. So I apologize if the links don't work. And new in 2025, and an initiative of myself, I felt, given the fact that we now have almost 60 students in our program, that it would be good to provide research training networks for our national remit, which is across the 4 nations, to provide online training, but also to provide our students a place to meet academics who study in specific fields. And so far, and I think it will only grow, our first network was the Law and Technology Network, which has a number of professors and students who have signed up, who get emails, who are invited to events. Our major event this year was the book launch by David Cowan, Law and Technology. That's literally the title. And that was very successful. We have established an international law training network, and the International Law Training Network is hosting the program I told you about, Scholarship at Risk. It also has academics and students who are meeting together to discuss areas of concern. As you might imagine, international law is quite under attack these days, so it's important that we get together to support each other. We also have a very exciting Access to Justice network that has now narrowed down its focus under the leadership of one of our fellows, Ben Turner. They are looking at legal qualifications in Canada, Australia, and the United Kingdom. And finally, just after Christmas, a group of scholars and former students, and they're going to invite current students, have started a financial regulation law network. That's to do with banking, regulation. We have a number of students in that area. And who knows, we may even get more. This is being recognized as part of Research England's national training network. So these academics who are from across the globe, frankly, and as I said, Canada, Australia, New Zealand for our Access to Justice group, are going to be part of our national education remit, which I often say is also international. The AI seminar I gave for the training network had about 600 people from across the world that signed up for it. Now, I wanted to show you, if you visit, we have, as I said, the wonderful IELTS library with a newsletter. It was completely transformed and redone. It has carols for postgraduate students, although I'm going to show you the postgraduate student room, which I Now, our building is particularly ugly at the corner of Russell Square. It's one of the brutalist architecture buildings, but inside it is quite beautiful. It has been completely redone with a reception area in the bottom, the library on the second floor, and aisles at the top on the fifth floor. And on the fifth floor, we have our PhD study room. By the way, I took these pictures. I try and urge students now, as you can see, it was empty that day, that if they are visiting London, to come in and park and visit with us. My office is across the hall. We do have scholars such as Mahmoud Bagheri, one of our supervisors, who uses the room to work in when he's here. We have students. One of our students is a judge who comes in and works on a regular basis. One of my students is using the room on a regular basis. So there are computers, as you see, but most people bring their own laptops and access the network. It's a beautiful space. It overlooks the Senate House. It has a kitchen, and it really does provide a community. And across the hall, which I didn't show you in the pictures, there are a couple of little interview rooms, so that if you were doing interviews or focus groups, there is actually facilities to do that across the hall. And so, stop share. Questions and answers. I've already got some. Hi from Canada. Hello. Yes, I'm so proud these days about Mark Carney, I can't tell you. So, Robert, I've tried to confirm the tuition fees. Can you comment on the distinction between home and overseas? Now, Robert, this is one that annoys me, and you can imagine, because I had to spend my life savings coming to London. And in my day, we had to actually be physically present. But there is no distinction in tuition fees. The distinction is between home and overseas. And if you are overseas, you pay overseas fees, which are over £16,000 a year. Now, you're going to just have a heart attack with that amount, but have a look at what US fees are for PhDs. It is cheaper in Canada. There is no question. But a Canadian PhD can take you 5 years, because you have to do courses, upgrade, and then work on your thesis. Our entire program is what I say is writing a book. And so when I did the calculation, now admittedly it was less. My tuition was about £10,000 a year. When I did the calculation, it was worth it to me because I was able to complete my PhD in 3 years. And so it was worth it financially to pay the extensive tuition fees. There are no courses or TAs. No, the entirety of the program is research. Now, a couple of our students who actually live here in London are able to teach in some of the London colleges. And that is what a TA is. They're teaching assistants. But it's not available online for distance learning students, unfortunately. Now, yeah, calculating the exact fees for part-time. Well, luckily enough, I attended another seminar a few days ago, and because I didn't know the answer to this. The minimum is 4 years part-time. That's really good news, actually, if you calculate it. So the minimum is 4 years. Part-time is half the fees. So you do the math. Okay, if you could complete a part-time PhD in 4 years instead of a full-time PhD in 3 years, it would be a savings. However, that's not the decision you should be making. The decision you should be making, because it's about lost opportunity in your life. For me, I decided to do full-time because I knew I wanted to change my career. And I didn't want to go back to practicing domestically in Canada. I knew I wanted to become an academic, and I was older. I was 44 when I first left Kingston, Ontario, to go to London. And so my professor made me promise I would get my PhD before 50, which I did. I was 48, and I published my first book at 50. Now, I've had a fabulous career since then, and I highly recommend it. But for me, the calculation was I needed to finish within a certain number of years. But I was prepared to devote my full time to that. Now, many of our students now are working. They cannot do that. And so my advice is the reverse. If you have a full-time job, you're crazy to take on a full-time PhD. You couldn't do it unless you decided to go without sleep. Now, there are students who will get leave from their job to do writing up or other things. You have to talk to your employer, make an arrangement, but full-time is really almost impossible if you've got a full-time job. Applying for funding, Linda, I have to tell you the bad news. Unless you have absolute A+, not A plus marks in your previous degrees, don't even bother. The funding atmosphere now is horrific. It is so competitive. But when do you apply for funding during the process? Before the process. You get on the funding page. We have a funding page. You get on your national funding page in South Africa to see what is available for South Africans studying abroad, because you're much more likely to get funding from your own country than from the United Kingdom. Why? I make no bones about this. PhDs are part of the money-making exercise in academia. And this is all over. I've worked in Canada, Australia, and here. All over. PhD students' tuition is essential to the income. Sarvar, are scholarships available? Yes, but extremely limited. It's one of the things that's happened in the recent years. I must say I applied for a scholarship and was not successful. I was a very good B+ student. I had an A in my master's and I didn't get funding. It's very, very, very difficult. And I know that's often heartbreakingly the end of the process for some students, because if they can't get funding, they can't do a PhD. Do I agree with that? Of course not. Do I think there should be more scholarships available? Of course I do. In fact, when I die, I hope to leave a little bit of money in my will for a scholarship. I hope people consider that who are older. We do try, but at the University of London, there's almost no funding available. And the other issue is for law. One of the reasons scholarships aren't available for law is law is considered a profession where people have savings and have money to undertake further study. And it's simply, and that can be a bias, but it is the case. Most of our students have practiced law, have a background in law, and have savings, or already have appointments in law firms or courts or corporations that enable them to continue to study. Now, the University of London is where the degree is issued from. So I think that would be recognized in Oman. I was in Oman on a trip, but I was with a different university. But I think the ministry recognizes a degree issued from the University of London. I would think so. Yes, our website, Robert, is out of date about the 2-week training on site. The 2-week training at the beginning of the program is the research methods course, and it is now completely online. And I'll change that. I'm sorry about misleading you on the website. Does IELTS provide guidance in selecting a research topic? Also, the support for drafting the research proposal. Yes, I provide guidelines, so just email me. Guidance on selecting a research topic, no, that's part of the test. Part of the test is that you can pick your own topic. Now, sometimes, and I would advise this, you could be studying for a master's or I had an academic mentor from one of my master's degree, and I sat down with him and asked his advice. So one of your previous professors you could talk to about it, but it is a test here. A supervisor will not help you draft the research proposal. They will not do it. Yes, you can do full-time by distance learning. Is it possible to establish a partnership between the University in London and the University in my country in order to conduct my PhD studies for my country? We don't do that traditionally. And again, it is the financial issue that the tuition fees come to the University of London. And so universities are not going to be too keen to get no tuition fees. We do have a partnership with a college in Ghana where we offer reduced fees. And again, that was because part of the issue is the financial pressure for students from Africa. But generally, no. What that is called a co-tutel, two universities sponsoring a student. But we are so busy, we just haven't got the capacity to set that up. Yes, Robert. In fact, I urge people to send the CV and proposal before actually submitting an application, because you want to make sure it's going to be okay. And even though it's only £50, it's still £50 that you would have wasted if you haven't had a chance to talk to me first. So yes, please. Hi from Kuala Lumpur. I had a lot of partnerships with universities in Malaysia when I was the head of this law school at Reading. So one of my favorite places. How long does the review process? Great question. And the second part of your question, yes. There's lots of opportunities. This is a topic, in fact, law reform, parliaments, government institutions, to engage. Yes. And if you talk, the law and legislative drafting group would be very interested in that. We've actually got a student now who's with the European Commission. How long does the review process? It depends. Sometimes I really struggle. It could be a topic where I'm not very familiar with it and I'm trying to find supervisors. It could be a few months. Other times it could be something that I know one topic I just jumped at it and said, oh my God, yes, let's find you a supervisor quickly. But it really depends. Sometimes it takes a while trying to find the supervisors. By the way, one of the issues why we've moved the application to October 31st is, please, if you are applying for January entry, the earlier possible, because people tend to go away over the Christmas season. Hello from Singapore. Hello, I'm considering a comparative law thesis on how two South Asian countries regulate financial crime. Okay, text analysis without empirical research. Yes, absolutely. You don't have to do empirical research. What should I keep in mind if I go on this route? Well, one of the issues we'll have, person from Singapore, is finding people who are experts in South Asia. Okay, so that you might want to start reading the literature, and even in your proposal, say, you know, these are the names of a couple of people who are working on this. And that would give me a way to steer who to approach. So that's the only difficulty I can see there. Difference between full-time and part-time, as I said, yes, it's about half. Yes, you can submit your application before IELTS release, but we've had a couple of tragic cases where students got sick and missed the exam, and then you're deferred for a whole semester. Get your IELTS done fast, please, because that can hold up the whole thing. You could have a brilliant proposal, supervisors in line, and you missed your IELTS test and you're done. And that's just tragic. My area is sports law. Is there supervision for that? I can't tell you that off the top of my head. It would be fun to look for them. I can't 100% guarantee. It's not an area I'm familiar with, but I do know it's becoming quite an interest. And by the way, it's one that's not as well researched. So can you do full time? Yes. You have a law degree in MSc? Yep, you qualify. How can I find supervisor related corporate law research? Can you suggest some professors? Well, Mahmoud Bagheri in our institute would review your proposal, but you can just send it to me. Okay. But he could give me some suggestions. I'll be in London for my LLM convocation at UO in April. Absolutely come and meet with me, Robert. That's what I should say to everybody. I'm also very happy if you happen to be in London and you want to meet me. I'd be delighted. Because I found that I found my best students from doing that, just talking to them, getting an idea of what they're doing. So absolutely. Now, you already asked the sports law. Should you have a concrete topic in mind, a research question, a wide revision of the bibliography identifying the gaps? Yes, and I should be very specific about that. It can be a wide-ish research question, but yes, a research question. As I said, what is the gap you were looking at? That's your research question. What question are you seeking to answer? So a concrete topic, at least the more you narrow it down, the better it is. A wide revision of the bibliography identified the gaps. Well, that's what you do in the background. And then on your proposal, you can put a brief bibliography as well. So you certainly can add that. Yeah, it's probably a little more than 8,000 now. By the way, it goes up every year. So it goes up by a percentage every year. So it's probably more than 8,000. I'm not quite sure. I mean, it is published. The fees are published. Who is IELTS mandatory? This is a bit of a complex question. IELTS is mandatory for those people for sure that have not studied in English. It's 100%. Those from other countries who have English university degrees, I think, can get an exemption. But the crazy situation, and I know this can be crazy, is some students from English-speaking countries still have to provide IELTS. I can't answer this question. What I would suggest is that you would have to ask the admissions department exactly where you're from and what your circumstances are. Do you suggest contacting the supervisor in advance? No, you let me do that. Unless it's someone you already know, and you know that person is really keen to supervise you, but we should talk about that in advance. Usually I contact them. Are there supervisors for technology law? Yes, we have a gang of them. Can you suggest one? If you want to look at the work of David Cowan, particularly on law and technology, he is at Maynooth in Ireland. If you want to look at Ben Turner from Cardiff, but as I said, they go through me. So they have a law and technology group. This is what's so innovative about this group. And then they discuss amongst themselves who has the capacity to do supervision in what particular areas. So for a sports law, I'll get a supervisor. I can't 100% guarantee. I would certainly love to look. And I can't guarantee it because even if you get a name, if you say to me, I want Professor so-and-so, Professor so-and-so may already have 10 students and isn't taking on anybody else. So even if we find the supervisor, it has to be a supervisor who's willing to take on another PhD student. And these are very busy people. Sports law is a very niche field, so it may be that these specialists don't have a lot of capacity. But certainly I would look. I mean, I think it, as I said, a very interesting area. What's a typical time frame for candidates who are in full-time public service working with government? Would 3 years be enough? I think if you're working with government, 3 years is not going to be enough. I think it would be more like 5 years and you should go part-time. Do we have ready available supervisors on intellectual property? I have a number of names, Chua, of people in intellectual property. In fact, one of my best friends is an intellectual property geek. And if he can't do it, he often gives me names of people to contact. And I've been fairly successful in that. I'm originally from it, but did my master's from US, and I've been living here since 2018. Do I need IELTS? You will have to check with them. For me, no, but sometimes the admissions department can be a bit difficult on this. So you would have to check with them. But I mean, you have an English master's degree. It would be, I think you just got to check with them. They get mad at me when I start interfering with their language. Again, would it exempt you for teaching law in English? I don't know. Which professors? I have no idea. I have to start looking at sports law. I can't give you names right now. Yes, will supervisors be suggested from among the academic staff of UCL and Queen Mary? Sometimes, but they also have their own students. It depends on the project. If it's a project they're very interested in, they will sometimes supervise for us as well. That's the case of universities across, except, and so let's stop this question. Professors at Cambridge and Oxford will not take students outside of Cambridge and Oxford because they are contractually forbidden from doing so. But UCL and Queen Mary is part of the University of London consortium, and they certainly are able to take our students. So we do have supervisors both from UCL and Queen Mary. What happens if a supervisor cannot be found for my proposal, but it is good otherwise? Well, sometimes I literally will tell a student about another university that has a center. For example, there was one student who wanted to do something in medical law, and I couldn't find anybody, but King's had a medical law institute. I suggested they apply there, and they did. Sorry, I missed out on study leave from working with government. Well, there are provisions in various governments, and I know this because I've had friends in the Department of Defense in Canada, for example, who can apply for leave while studying. It's normally not longer than a year. That's probably the outside limit, but there are provisions in government that provide for leave. I was teaching University of London undergraduate program. Is that an advantage? Well, certainly would help your CV. Yes, I think that's an advantage. Link me up with professors who can supervise. No, I will not, Christine. You keep asking this. I look for the supervisors. I do not want my students bothering academics when I'm looking for this. So you have to provide me with a CV and a proposal, and I look for the supervisors. If you want to look for the supervisors, apply elsewhere, please. I want to send my research proposal and CV. You're more than welcome to. I work in compliance, would love to explore PhD options under financial crime. Do you have supervisors available? Yes, definitely in that area. One of our supervisors is Colin King at the University of Sydney, but they're very busy and it's got to be an excellent proposal. Good. Robert, I hope you do drop in. Can I send 2 proposals, Godwin? Absolutely. And I don't know why this person's given me their Gmail address, but what I suggest is you email me, and it's been put in the chat. Okay, I have to go because I've been told we're near the end of our process. Please just email me at Susan Breau, Susan.Breau. Just get that on. I can't seem to send it. Well, I'll just put susan.breau@sas.ac.uk. Thank you very much. Goodbye.